But why don't you walk them through how a retirement budget works and what fixed and social expenses mean?
Yeah, so a retirement budget, what it's going to take for you to maintain your standard of living. All right, so to even get to the end result, that is the absolute most crucial component, is to have some certainty around what it is it's going to cost you. And you really have to break that down into different categories. And we see a good example of that today through inflation, something that we didn't worry about for 20 years. And for the first time in 20 years, people are at least respecting that. And so just as a quick aside, going to those assumptions, for many years, we just plugged in a simple 2%. Not we here at Financial Enhancement Group, but we as an industry would plug in a simple 2% inflation rate without testing that through other variables. Now, all of a sudden, we say, hey, whatever happens, it probably makes some sense to test that thing out at 3 or 4. And that gets into that retirement budget and why we think it's so important to break your budget down into a couple of different categories. The first of which are fixed costs, those things that it's going to cost to carry your household, regardless of what you're going to do. You're going to need to eat. You're going to need shelter. You're going to need a certain set of transportation to and from doctor's appointments, whatever that is for your household. You're going to have a fixed standard of living, and that fixed standard of living is probably going to inflate at a pretty decent rate. It's going to grow over time. And utilities, obviously, a big piece of that. Then on the other hand of that, we have what we call our social expenses. Those are more flexible. Those are things that are choices. It's going to be whether that's travel in your case, whether it's sports, whatever it may be. You're going to have a certain social spending that tends to decline over time. We don't want to assume a high rate of inflation because typically we find you lose energy, you lose the ability to get out and do those things. So therefore that becomes over time a smaller piece of your budget. So separating those two helps us get a more dynamic view into what it's going to take to support a standard of living all the way through the end of that life expectancy.